Before you start your project, you should have some type of process in place on how to handle your footage after you shoot it. Let's talk about mine. So my process really isn't that complicated. There might be a couple of things that you might want to change depending on what type of footage you shoot, but let's just start off right from the get-go. The first thing that I have is I always fill up one of these little guys with SD cards if the camera in which I'm shooting has SD cards. If I'm shooting with something else, I'll have some type of container for those. The link to buy all this stuff will be in the description if you want to pick this up on Amazon. But inside, there's just a whole bunch of slots. Normally these are all filled up and they will all be facing label side up. And that just indicates that they can be formatted and used. So I will take one of these and put it in my camera. When I'm done shooting on it, so when it's full, I will then just put it in here upside down. And then the upside down ones just indicate that those are currently used. Any of the other ones I can pull out, use, and then I flip those upside down as well. And it's pretty cool because all the different styles for SD cards, they store them inside here. So that's the first thing that I do. After I'm done shooting for the day, I will back up to different hard drives. So I have these hard drives. These are just Western Digital My Passport. I get rid of the My Passport software on them, but I just will get 2 of them. And the idea here is that you want to store your footage to both of these and keep these in 2 different locations. So I have a folder structure that I put on these, and that folder structure is very simple. It starts with the date in which I'm shooting everything. And then inside that folder, it will have the camera in which the card is from. So I might shoot a bunch of things. One might be my normal camera, one might be a drone, one might be a C camera, you know, if I have multiple cameras while I'm shooting. So the next folder is the camera in which I shot on. Inside that, it will be the card number. So at the beginning of my day, I start with card 1. Then I'll go to card 2, card 3, card 4 for that camera. Those will all be inside those folders. And I will copy that to the first drive. Then when I'm done with that, I will do the same exact thing to the second drive. These 2 drives never copy from one to the other. So I don't put data on one and then copy from one drive to the other. It always comes off of the SD card. And the reason being is because if I copy a file that has some type of problem, I want to copy a new version to the other off of the SD card and not from the one that has the corrupt file. There's a couple ways to ensure that when you copy the exact thing that is on the SD card or whatever the other media is. And it's using some sort of file checker. DaVinci Resolve actually has one to dump your memory cards to another media, if it's one of these, if it's the internal hard drive. But what it does is it checks both files, and so it takes the one, it copies it to the other one. Then it checks this file, and it makes a checksum, and then it checks this file to see if they match up, just to make sure that there isn't any type of problem with both files after they have copied, and make sure that they're both the same. I personally just copy to one hard drive, and then I go and I copy to the other hard drive using that folder structure that I talked to you previously. If you do not want to use DaVinci Resolve within Windows, you can use what's called RoboCopy. It comes with all versions of Windows, I believe. You can use that, you can look that up, and it copies from one to the other, and it also does that checksum to make sure that the file is in its full form and that there isn't anything within it that is corrupt. So I copy to 2 drives. What I do with one drive goes in my backpack that I will carry around for the whole trip. So it normally just has maybe camera gear in there or whatever book bag that I'm carrying around. The one drive will always live with me. The other drive will go in someone else's bag that will stay at the hotel. The idea here is that we have 2 drives in 2 different locations, so that if I accidentally leave my book bag somewhere, leave it in a cab, I still have the other one. And vice versa, if something happens to the hotel, items go missing or the hotel burns down, whatever it may be, I still have mine. That is a big thing when you are working on projects where you are renting gear or you have multiple people on site and you are taking up someone else's time. Time is money. A lot of the times you cannot recreate a lot of footage also. So if you're doing like different events, like I go skiing, so like that footage I cannot recreate. So I will always have that footage in 2 different locations. When I am done and I'm back in the office and I have both drives, hopefully, I can then start to upload them to my server. So I have a local server. I talked about it in this other video, but the idea here is that I take this drive and I will then copy it to my server. The folder structure on my server is a little bit different. Here is what I do for stock. I will first have the date of the shoot, and within that folder name, I also put a space in there and I put a location, or if it's just a particular subject, I will put that subject in there. Inside that folder, compression, CSV, stocks, edits, media, export. Quickly go through why I create all of these. So compression, if I'm shooting in a raw format, I will compress a lot of that. If I compress anything, it'll get put into there for my proxies. CSVs are used towards the end of the workflow for the stock stuff. That is the file in which that I use to upload to a stock site. And then docs, if I ever have to have some type of release form of a building, some type of structure, if it's a particular piece of equipment, or if I have to get a release form for an actor, it will then go in there after I scan it quick, throw it in there. The next one is edits. When I'm done with editing, I will then take my project file and I will dump it into here. The next one is media. Everything that's on my drive will then get stuck into this media folder. Additionally, I have exports. Exports are the final file that I will then send to the stock agency that I sell through. That's kind of how that workflow is. Now, I know a lot of people don't really shoot stock, so I also did a lot of ad spots. So the structure for the ad spots is a little different. First one I would start off with is the client's name, and then it would go to the project name. This was sort of like summer sale or new menu or whatever it may be. It was just a project. And then inside that project, if there was multiple days, I would typically have the date in which I shot something, and it would just be all of the information that came off of here, the same folder structure off of here. In the project file, I would also have another folder for any type of voiceovers I did, another one for docs. Inside the docs, I would have all the release forms as well. I would also have another one for edits. Inside of there would be the project file, obviously. I would have an export. Inside the export for this one, it's a little bit different because inside the export, I would have different version folders as well. What I noticed is that I would cut it up, render it out, and then show the edits and get some type of feedback, and that would go back and forth for a couple of edits. And I would also hold those edits for if the client ever had to come in, take a look at some of my footage, what changed previously, what we changed up until this point, and then being able to go back and look at a previous edit for things that we liked, didn't like, and that sort of thing. I always found that the versions was a good idea to have there as well. So that's kind of how I did the client side. So now I have the footage off of these onto my server. We're not done yet. We're almost done. The next thing is if for some reason my server went up in flames, the building ever went up in flames, I would lose all that data, and I don't want to lose the data. So I also do an offsite backup. And this where it starts to get expensive. There are a couple of things you can do to save money here. The other machine doesn't need to have the horsepower for throughput. As I explained in that other video, my system's set up through a 10 gig link, but the server that I have as an offsite doesn't have the 10 gig link. It just has a gigabit connection, which most computers do. And that's just because it's going through the internet once it leaves this building, and I'm not going to be pushing 10 gigs to that building. So because of that, I can save, and I don't have to get a lot of like the really high-end stuff to be able to push that. In the grand scheme, when it comes to data centers, the stuff I have isn't very high-end, but I can get even cheaper equipment for that other machine. It just runs the same software so that if a drive dies over there, I can just swap it, not lose any data. Same thing here. I can swap drives, not lose any data. To this point, I've never had to use the offsite backup, but you know, people have fires, flood, whatever it may be. I like to have the peace of mind of having all of my stuff in another location in case something did happen to the server that I have here. So that's kind of how I deal with footage when it goes from the camera all the way to complete backups. There was a time where when I first started that I just had multiple drives in my computer, and each one just had some projects on it. You know what I mean? I remember back in the day, I had a 500 gig hard drive, and you know, now that's kind of laughable, but back then drives weren't as big as they are now. 500 gig drives have a couple of them, and one of the drives, you have that old school going on, and you lose all the data and you can't get any of that back. When that happened, luckily all the projects that were on that drive were already completed, but I could never go back to build my reel that would have all of my past year's work because a lot of the work was on that drive. So it was kind of like a downside. Also, sometimes you have clients, if you're working with them for a bit, they want you to take old footage and chop it up. Obviously, you can charge them for, you know, being able to archive that old footage if they ever want to make stuff from that. But being able to go back to that archive whenever you want is always nice. There's a lot of online ways to, you know, store backups. There's always a solution for everyone. But once you get, you know, multiple terabytes, it kind of gets expensive to have all that stuff in the cloud per se, and at least retrieving it. There's a lot of like ways with like Google Cloud and Amazon cloud services that you can put stuff on there, but they charge you for the bandwidth. So anytime you have to pull that stuff from the cloud, they're going to charge you a lot more for. Luckily, I haven't had to do that with my systems, but that's how I chose to do it. But with that being said, let me know if there's any tools in which you use in the comments. If you have any ideas, suggestions for me to do in my next video, let me know down there as well. Again, my name's JR, and thanks for watching.